over to you, Sue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you then. Good to see you all again. We've actually got up to...
I think Sue has frozen. We've got up to now at chapter 6, I think she's saying. That's not great when the person who's speaking...
How David eventually became king over all the tribes of Israel. And he set up his fortress in Jerusalem, which then became known as the City of David. In fact, today it's often called the City of David. Can you all hear? Carol's looking a bit...
Yeah, we can now.
Yeah, no, we can lose you for a few seconds, but we can hear you now.
Okay, thanks. So today we're going to read about another incident which happened after David had become king. And it's in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 1 to 11. Leslie, would you be able to read that for us?
Yes, I've got it in front of me, Sue.
Yeah, verses 1 to 11, thank you.
Yes. So this is called the Ark Brought to Jerusalem. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring up from there the Ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. They set the Ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the Ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with castanets, harps, lyres, tambourines, rattles, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the Ark of God, because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the Ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household.
Thanks, Leslie. That's great. Now, there's another account of these happenings in 2 Samuel in Chronicles. Most of the time they're exactly the same, but sometimes we get a few extra details. So I'm just going to read a little bit from 1 Chronicles chapter 13, which is about the same event. And it says, David conferred with each of his officers, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. He then said to the whole assembly of Israel, "If it seems good to you, and if it is the will of the Lord our God, let us send word far and wide to the rest of our people throughout the territories of Israel, and also to the priests and Levites who are with them in their towns and pasture lands, to come and join us. Let us bring the ark of our God back to us. For we did not inquire of it during the reign of Saul. The whole assembly agreed to do this, because it seemed right to all the people." So let's just think for a minute about this. What is the plan? What is the plan?
Sorry, can I
questions
just...
at the beginning are easy.
Can you tell me, Cece's looking up in her Chinese Bible.
Yeah, which part?
Well, can you give us the verses?
Yeah.
Well, we're looking into Samuel chapter 6, verses 1 to 11.
Samuel 6.
The bit I just read, which is a supplementary account, is in 1 Chronicles 13.
Verses 1 to 4.
Yeah.
So it's 1 Chronicles 13, 1 to 4, and Samuel 6,
2 Samuel 6.
the whole of that chapter.
We are looking at the whole of that chapter. We've just got
Okay.
down to verse 11 at the moment. Okay, so let's just think back then. What is the basic plan now David settled in Jerusalem? What is the plan that they're going to do?
Bring the Ark of God there.
Thank you, Leslie. Yes, their plan is to bring the ark back to Jerusalem. What did not happen under Saul in 1 Chronicles 13, verse 3?
They didn't inquire of God what to do with
That's
it.
right. They didn't, and we'll look a bit more about the ark in a minute, but they didn't inquire of it. Okay, so in this account here back in Samuel, how was the ark carried?
A
Verse
cart.
3. It was carried on a cart. Okay, and what did Uzzah do?
Touched it.
He
Because it
touched
stumbled.
it. And what happened to it?
He
To
died.
him?
Died.
He died. And what was David's reaction? Verse 8
Anger.
and verse 9.
Angry.
He
First,
was angered. wasn't he?
angry at this battle. And also verse 9.
He was angry with God.
Yeah. He was
David
angry.
afraid of the Lord, wasn't he? Yeah.
Okay. And in verse 9, he was afraid of the Lord. And what did he say?
How can the
Genesis
ark
39.
of the Lord ever come to me?
That's right.
Mm.
So these events happen. We're going to look at them in a bit more detail, but basically they decided they wanted the ark to come to Jerusalem. They set about doing it. But what happened was that one of the people next to the cart touched it and they were struck dead.
But he
And
only,
David was
he only
angry
did it
with
to
God that
steady
that
the thing.
happened.
That the oxen stumbled, didn't he? And he thought it might fall off, I suppose.
That's right, yeah. Yeah. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail. We're not jumping over it. But also then, so we see that David was afraid and he began to wonder, well, how on earth is the ark ever going to be able to come to it? Okay. Now, at first sight, as we've sort of intimated, this is quite hard to understand. Surely it was the right thing to bring the ark back to the centre of where David now was. He was the king. That was a good thing to do, wasn't it? Because the king was there and he would then be able to seek God. Okay, so that seems to be a good thing. However, something in this account wasn't quite right because a man ended up dying. So to understand what actually happened here and to understand that it wasn't just God, getting cross and just whatever, acting irrationally, we need to a little bit of research into this ark and see what's that. Now I've asked Carol if she could have a picture of what the ark looked like. So is that possible to have that up, Carol? Carol?
Yeah, it's coming.
Carol, can you not hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
What's going on? It's a picture of
Yeah.
this ark.
You
There
see
it is.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, we can see that.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah. So when the Israelites were being led by Moses in the wilderness, they were instructed to build this thing called the Ark of the Covenant. And it was given quite a lot of detail as to how this was going to happen. So back in Exodus chapter 25, this is what we read, verse 8. It says, "Then let them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you." Now, there's quite an interesting secular account by Josephus about this Ark of the Covenant. So I thought I'd just read that to you, because it's quite, as an outsider looking in, it tells us a bit about what this, the tabernacle was the tent and the ark was the thing that was placed in it. So it says this in Josephus: "There was also an ark made sacred to God, of wood, that was naturally strong and could not be corrupted. It was covered all over with gold, both inside and outside,
she's sharing screen.
so that the wooden part was not seen. Had a cover with golden hinges after a wonderful manner. There were 2 gold rings on each of the longer boards and passing through the entire wood, and through them gilt bars passed along each board, that it might be moved and carried about as occasion should require. It was not drawn by a cart with oxen, but borne on the shoulders of the priests. Upon its cover were 2 images. The Hebrews called them cherubim. They are flying creatures, but their form is not like that of any creatures which men had seen, though Moses said he had seen such beings near the throne of God. In this ark he put 2 tablets, whereon the 10 commandments were written, and this ark he placed in the most holy place." So that's quite an interesting outsider looking in, Gentiles looking at it and reporting on the importance of this ark to the Israelites. Okay, so we also read back in Exodus 25, verse 18 now, a bit more about these cherubim. And the instructions that God gave Moses were this: to make two cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. And you can see that in the picture. 1 cherub on one end and the second on the other. In verse 20, the cherubim are to have wings spread upwards, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other, looking towards the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark and put in the ark the tablets of the covenant that I will give you. There above the cover, between the 2 cherubim that are now over the ark of the covenant law, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites. And in Numbers 7 verse 89 it says this: "When Moses entered the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from between the 2 cherubim above the atonement cover on the ark. In this way the Lord spoke to him." Okay, so take a long look at that picture that's up on the screen at the moment. So we've got the cherubim, and we're told here that God spoke to Moses in that place between the place where those 2 cherubim are. Okay, Carol, I think we can perhaps remove that picture now so I can see a few more people. That'd be great. Thanks. That's great. Yeah. Okay, so you've got that picture in your mind. I think this is beginning to help us understand a little bit about these incidences in 2 Samuel. Okay. So I think it's worth noting too, in verse 2 of today's passage, that the ark is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. If you remember the time when Moses went up Mount Sinai a second time to collect the or to re-get the commandments, And again, it's hard to look all this up as we're going through, but I'll read it to you. In Exodus 34, verse 5, we read this. So Moses had gone up to Mount Sinai and got the 10 commandments the first time, come down, seen Aaron and the golden calf, and gone back up to get new ones, basically. And it says, the Lord came down in a cloud and stood with Moses and proclaimed his name, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving the wickedness, rebellion of sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. So do you see there, we begin to have this tension. God's name, he's a compassionate, gracious God, slow, abounding in love and all of those things, slow to anger. But nevertheless, he cannot leave the guilty unpunished. So there's this tension, isn't it? Because God is a God of justice. Therefore, there must be repercussions for wrongdoings. Okay, and that's a tension we often find when we read in the Bible. God, a God of love and justice, slow to anger. But nevertheless, when something goes wrong or people disobey, he has to act, he has to do something about that. Okay, we'll get back to 2 Samuel. I know we're doing a bit of a tour, but I think we have to do this to understand the incidents that we just read about in 2 Samuel. So the other thing there was, as well as the ark being built, there were also instructions about how to move the ark when they went from various places around the wilderness, and who was to do it, how it was to be carried. And this comes up in Numbers chapter 4. And in Numbers chapter 4, verse 1, sorry, a bit of interference there. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take a census of the Kohathite branch of the Levites by their clans. Verse 4, this is the work of the Kohathites at the tent of meeting, the care of the most holy things. When the camp is to move, Aaron and his sons are to go in and take down the shielding curtain and put it over the Ark of the Covenant law. They are to cover the curtain with a durable leather, spread a cloth of solid blue over that, and put the poles in place. After Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy articles, and when the camp is ready to move, only then are the Kohathites to come and do the carrying. But they must not touch the holy things, or they will die. So I think, Carol, there's another picture there of the ark being carried.
Yeah, I just
So Carol, can you put the second picture up?
absolutely. Right, let me move down. Oh, I'm going to move down. How do I do that? There we go.
Oh, yeah, thanks. That's brilliant. Okay. So more, this is a model this time, but it's showing us, according to the instructions that were given to Moses, how the ark was to be carried by these people of the tribe of a division of the Levites, the Kohathites, set aside specifically to carry the ark on its poles there. They had to keep their distance from the ark. Okay, so I think those might now help us when we go back to 2 Samuel 6 and this incident with Uzzah. So I think we'll have to put it back, Carol, so I can actually see who might be talking.
Yeah.
So the question I'm going to ask you is, so what was wrong with the approach of David and the people when they set out to go and get this ark? What's wrong with it?
They
Didn't
weren't
follow
doing it.
the guidelines for
Mm.
carrying the ark.
Okay, they didn't follow the guidelines, Leslie's saying. Okay. Anything more than that?
I don't think they knew. I don't think David really knew how to carry it, or he hadn't learnt that. So yeah, they weren't. They didn't go through the right process. So that, and I suppose God had to. If he didn't correct them, then they would have just continued, and then it would have got lost the right way to sort of carry it. So it's just sort of a lesson for us that we need to go through the right process.
Yeah. So what do we really learn about what this ark represented? What was so important about it?
It was the presence of God. It was God with them.
Okay, thanks, Margaret. Yes, it actually showed the presence of God with the people. And later on, I think if you think back to Moses, when he came down the mountain, and often when he went in to inquire of the Lord in the ark, he came out, his face was shining. He had to wear a veil because he'd met or see the very holiness of God in that place. And when he came out, it's like bright light that we can't imagine. And that, what does that represent, do you think? It will tell us about God. This bright light when he met with Moses, what does it tell us about God?
He's a very holy God. He's
Yes.
holy, and there's only him. He's the only God, and he's holy. And,
That's right. Absolutely pure holiness. I know on Sundays we've been starting a bit in Revelation, and there quite often the Son of Man is described in this bright white light, absolute purity and holiness, and we can't go near it. If you imagine our own in our own universe, we look at the sun and we're told we mustn't, in the sky, the sun, we mustn't look at it because it would blind us. And I think imagine something even much more bright than that it just shows the absolute purity and holiness of God. And so what do you think God was teaching the Israelites through what happened to Uzzah?
That no one can approach God just like that. You have, like Michelle said before, there's a certain way of doing it, like had been taught in Exodus and Leviticus, all those special regulations that the Levites and the other division, I can't pronounce it, Kohathites, they had to follow in order to be in his presence.
Yeah,
that's right.
I just think of the song, "Come Now Before Him with Reverence and Fear." And that's the way we should approach God, with reverence and fear.
Yes, thanks, Leslie. I think there is a message in there for us, isn't there, in the way that we must come to God, because God hasn't changed. We have Jesus who we can come to God through. God is still a holy God, and we have to come before him with reverence and fear and awe and all those things. And I mean, when we read this, God is a God to be feared. Now, does that mean that we've got to be frightened and afraid of him? How can we understand that today?
it's a healthy, respectful fear, isn't it? It's not like the fear that the world offers.
So who in particular doesn't need to be afraid of God in the way that, that we said that he's unapproachable? How does that work out for us if we're, Christian believers today?
Through Jesus dying on the cross, and the curtain was torn in two, but we can approach God through Jesus. If we know and love the Lord Jesus, then that is how we can approach God.
Okay, thanks
Amen.
for that. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So in our own, we are unholy people. There's lots of, we call it sin, don't we? I put myself at the centre. I'm selfish and all those things. And God can't look on those things because he is pure and holy. However, we come up to Easter soon, aren't we?
Yeah.
We remember that time when Jesus was the sacrifice for us, and he did open the way for anyone who comes through Jesus to come into the presence of God. How amazing is that? So yes, on one hand, we need to approach him with reverence and all. We can't just, we can go too far, can't we? Jesus is my friend, or I'm in and out of his presence. Yes, but we have to approach him with reverence and fear and humility, that that we are allowed to come in his presence, not to take that for granted. Okay.
Does it
So
seem as
why
though,
I think it was in Jackie.
I was just wondering, I mean, it seems as though they're having a bit of a jolly, really, with their celebration, maybe rather than in what they were carrying.
Okay, yeah. The whole thing was just sort of done, wasn't it? Oh, let's go and get the ark. And they stuck it on a cart. I don't know, we can't look too many other things, but you might remember that when the ark was raided by the Philistines, and they started having all sorts of problems, they sent the ark back to Israel on a cart. So clearly that was in their, David's, perhaps the people's minds, that you carry the ark on a cart, and they sent it off in this story. Here they built a new cart for it and sent it off with the oxen, but they hadn't gone back to the idea that get the instructions given to Moses. This ark had to be carried in a very, very specific way, because it was a place where God was. It was a place where God met with the priests, and he met with Moses and gave his instructions. And they'd totally forgotten that, and they were having a bit of a jolly, as Jackie says. Okay, so let's go on. Unless anyone's got any questions about any of that. Are you happy with kind of what we've seen there? Okay.
One thing that struck me is that Uzzah was struck down because he touched the ark. How about all the people who lifted the ark to put it on the cart? It just struck me, why should one man be struck down when they've obviously lifted it and touched it in the past? Was there something else behind that?
Yeah, I think
because they lifted it with the arms of it rather than actually touch the ark itself. Maybe they just lifted it up by the support things.
Maybe it's because Uzzah, because he was quite close to David, so that sort of like shocked David to make sure that he realised to do the right process. So God may have just used him for the lesson. If it was one of the others who was like, don't want to sound like, oh, they're a nobody. Of course they're not a nobody, but maybe that, God knows, doesn't he? I mean, I suppose it just opened David's eyes to it. I don't know.
Okay, well, let's go back to our passage for today, 2 Samuel 6. We really are studying that. Okay, so we've read the account and we've looked at the fact that it was the name and that the importance of the cherubim and the ark, and we've read what happened in a bit of the party that they had, and how God was angry because basically they hadn't followed his instructions. And we see how David then became afraid of the Lord and wondered how the ark could ever go up to Jerusalem. So where in about verse 10, 11, where did the ark get taken?
He went to a Gittite.
Okay, yeah, the house of Obed-Edom.
Yeah, 3 months.
And how long was it there for?
3 months.
3 months, yeah. And what happened to the house of Obed Edom household?
The entire household was blessed as well as he was.
Okay,
The
that
Lord
the-
bless him.
Yeah, they were on fire
Yeah.
for the Lord, weren't they? I bet they were just praising like for 3 whole months and never went to sleep or anything.
No, we're not told that, are we? But certainly, while
Yeah.
it was there, the people were being blessed. Okay, so
I
carry on
understand.
now a bit further then.
Sorry,
Joy?
I understand Obed Edom was a Levite town where the Kohathites lived as well. So it was the right place for the ark.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
It's one of the mysteries. They have never, ever found it, have they? Disappeared.
Not yet, no.
The
No,
ark
yeah.
disappeared and nobody's ever found it. Lots of films about it, isn't there?
Yeah.
But they've never found where it is.
Okay, so just another question in there quickly. Why do you think it was so important at the beginning of David's reign that this incident happened? Why was it, David's just become king? Why? What was the purpose, if you like, of this incident? You might have already said it, but let's just say it again.
I suppose David had to remember that he was the Lord's servant. He wasn't in place of God. He had to do what God told him to do. And he had to be reminded, perhaps, that there was someone greater than him.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that, Joy. I think that's very true. The people and David, they had to recognise that although they had a king, God was still over all, everything, and they had to have a proper reverence for God. Okay, well, we're down to verse 12 now. Would somebody like to read 12 to verse 15, please?
I will, if you like.
Thanks.
Now King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sounds of trumpets.
Okay, so I think we've already done this. What happened to the house of Obed-Edom? They had blessings and it was there for 3 months. Now, I just want to nip back to 1 Chronicles account. There's a little bit of extra information there. So in 1 Chronicles chapter 15 and verse 1, we read this. And this again is at the same period of time. After David had constructed buildings for himself in the city of David, he prepared a place for the ark of God and pitched a tent for it. He said, "No one but the Levites may carry the ark of God, because the Lord chose them to carry the ark of the Lord and to minister before it forever." That's verse 1 and 2. And then going down to verse 11, it says, David summoned Zadok and Abiathar the priests and some other people who were Levites. He said, "You are the heads of the Levitical families. You and your fellow Levites are to consecrate yourselves and bring up the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel, and place it where I have prepared for it. It was because you, the Levites, did not bring it up the first time that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. We did not inquire of him about how to do it in the prescribed way. So the priests and Levites consecrated themselves in order to bring up the ark of the Lord. And the Levites carried the ark of God with the poles on their shoulders, as Moses had commanded, in accordance with the word of the Lord. And he went on to say about how they would bring it up with all the music and all the celebrations to mark this occasion there. So I wonder what was actually different about this second attempt now to bring the ark back to Jerusalem. What was different?
They did it correctly.
Okay, and what did correctly?
Reverently.
Yeah.
Reverently, yeah.
And the right people, the people that God.
Yeah,
had
the
elected
Levites.
to do it.
The right people were yeah. The right people, the Levites, the Kohathite branch of the Levites.
They carried it with the poles of the ark on their shoulders.
Yeah, they carried it now with the poles on their shoulders as it was designed to be carried, and not before as they had done, not on a cart. Okay, anything else?
They were rejoicing. Oh, we said that.
Yeah, there was, yeah.
They did a...
Both times, actually, there was
Yeah.
rejoicing, yeah, or celebration.
They stopped after 6 steps.
Yeah.
And had a bull and sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. So they'd gone very far, had they? 6 steps.
So all this sacrificing is quite harmless, but what did that sacrifice that David made there, what was that really showing?
Reverence and fear of the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So although some, yeah, Joy?
Sacrifice for sin, really, because sin has to be dealt with, and it was a sacrifice. I suppose David had learned the lesson from before and came with a different, with humility.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so what, I think actually I'm not going to ask that next question. I think we've probably dealt with that. So they had this celebration, and didn't they, with the music, the celebration, the dancing. They'd done that both times, but this time it was being done reverently in the right way. And I guess that, you know, we can apply that to ourselves. You know, it's not going to church, isn't just having a big sort of jolly, but it can be a joyful musical occasion. But we have to make sure the Lord is at the centre of our worship, and we're not just having a good time because for the sake of it. We have to keep the Lord central, don't we, when we come to worship him. And this is a reminder to us, I think, of that. Okay, well, we're meant to get on to the end of I want us to go on, Carol, so we've still got time to go on to the end of chapter 6. So we're up to verse 16 and we need to go down to verse 23. So can I have a reader, please? 2 Samuel 16 to 23.
Do you want me to read?
Thank you.
16.
Yes, please, that'd be great, Michelle.
As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window, and when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it, and David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of the Israelites, both men and women. And all the people went to their homes. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, disrobing in the sight of slave girls and of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by the slave girls you speak of, I will be held in honour.
And just one more verse, is there?
Oh, is there? Sorry. Oh, yeah. And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death.
Right, thanks so much for that, Michelle. So, if we look at verses 17 to 19 there, what happens when the ark gets to Jerusalem?
They made the sacrifices, burnt offerings and fellowship offerings.
Sacrifices were made again.
It was put in the tent. The ark was put in the tent.
It was put in the tabernacle, in the tent that David had prepared for it now. It all sounds quite structured, doesn't it? And purposeful of bringing everything, and it's got a place now where it's going to be. And after they'd finished sacrificing, verse 18.
Bless the people in the name of the Lord Almighty.
The people were blessed by David. And then in verse 19.
You all had presents.
Yes, yes. They were in presents, weren't they? Food
I wonder
was
if there were
offered
still 30,000 of them, because when it started off, there were 30,000. And I thought if there were still 30,000 of them, there's a lot of cooking.
Yeah,
was it all just ready for them?
yeah. I haven't really thought that. I don't know. But anyway,
I'm
I
always
think it's
practical.
fine that food, the food and giving out of food is a way of, in the Bible, it shows celebration and thankfulness, and it's a great sign of celebration that was there. Okay, so yep. And then all the people, it says, went back to their homes. So if we go back to verse 16, who was the person who appears not to have joined in the celebrations?
Michal.
And who was she?
Saul's daughter.
Yeah.
She was Saul's daughter, and also
David's first wife.
Thank you. Yes, David's first wife, back in the early days when he first went to the palace when Saul was king. He married Michal. Yeah. So in verse 20, we read what Michal says when she came out to meet David. So how would you describe her words?
Scathing.
Spiteful.
I think I heard someone say scathing.
Yeah, she was like,
Yeah.
she was like full of contempt.
Yeah.
Contempt, I heard.
Yeah, contempt.
Yeah. What do you think was behind her motives in the way that she responded? What was going on for her, maybe?
I think it was just this was the icing on the cake, wasn't it? This is like probably a build-up of everything that had happened in the past.
I think David had loved Michal, though, hadn't he? When
Joyce, David had.
Yeah, when Saul gave her to David, I think he loved her, didn't he?
He did love her, but I'm just saying I'm talking about Michal. I think for her past, like what happened with her dad and that other bloke, she got taken away. She got taken away from that. I can't remember his name.
I think, Paul, we can in one way feel sorry for Michal because she was used in a way, but she had terrific bitterness in her heart for the past. And, we can all be bitter about things that have happened, but she never ever brought it to God and asked for forgiveness and a heart that was changed. She had utter contempt for David because he wasn't acting as she thought a king should behave.
Yeah, no, thanks. That gives us a really good insight, I think, there. And perhaps yeah, I think Joy said that. I was going to say, what does it reveal about Michal's heart? And there is perhaps jealousy of David's popularity. There is bitterness there. She's not recognizing David as the king and the man he is. There's certainly a lot going on in her heart, because what's in our hearts comes out in our words. And here,
because she had no children,
has come out in her.
Because she had no children, it was seen as God's judgment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
On people who had no children.
Yeah,
we've seen that in other places in the Bible, haven't we?
Later on, yeah. Yeah. So in verses 21 and 22, what do we notice about David's response here? What's he saying?
Well, I'm not going to stop, he says.
Okay, he's going to carry on, yeah, dancing and having a celebration. But what's behind all the words he says? It says, verse 21, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house," i.e. Saul's house, when he appointed me David ruler over the Lord's people. And he said, David says, "I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor." What's David really saying?
David's real focus
Another way, what
is the Lord, isn't it?
Perhaps what does it show us about David's heart here?
He wants to do what's pleasing to the Lord
thanks,
rather
Carol.
than himself.
Yeah. So we said, so what comes out of our mouths and our words. Yeah. So if he's been humiliated and whatnot, he doesn't care about his own honor, but he cares about the honor of God. He's humble, isn't he? He's not lauding it above the people, or in the way that perhaps, I think you said, like as Saul did. Saul wanted to, be up there and I'm the king, I'm the king. David, and we saw this earlier, was a man after God's heart, and God knew that inside him. And here it really shows us that in David.
Does it show to a much smaller extent the humiliation that Jesus suffered on our behalf?
Okay, so David is often used, isn't he, as a type of great David's greater son, of Jesus to come. And certainly we do see some of those actions. Now, obviously, David wasn't sinless as Jesus was, but nevertheless, in David's heart, there was that desire to do what God wanted. And Jesus fulfilled that in totality, because he was the perfect son of David. Yeah. So we see that, don't we, that as the punishment here for Michal, she was never going to have children. In other words, the kingly line wasn't going to go down through Michal, because God had got other plans for that. So no children for Michal. I think just as we draw to a close, we need to remember that we need to approach God reverently, but also with joy, because Jesus has paid the price for our unholiness, and we can come into his presence. We need to watch what's in our hearts to make sure there is no bitter root, so that the words that come out of our mouth come from a spring of well-being rather than a place of bitterness. And I will just close by what it says in Hebrews 4 verse 16. It says, let us as God's people approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. So that's a whistle-stop tour, isn't it, through that chapter, and there's lots of things we could have stopped on. But if you want to know, read back on it, look back at it, and read the other version in Chronicles, and just let God speak to our hearts about what it's telling us for today. I hope that has been helpful for us. Carol, shall I hand back to you?
Yeah,
if you
thank you.
Want to
Thank you, Sue, for that this morning.
Close or in prayer, or what we want to do.
Yeah, thank you for that this morning. We will close in prayer. We've got a few minutes. There's a few things that that I was thinking that'd be good to pray for. Jan, you've mentioned your sister Marge, who's just gone into a home and she's suffering with dementia. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe if we could pray for Marge, Jan's sister. Also, Peter and Jean have been mentioned again. So they're struggling with their health, and Jean is waiting to have a gallbladder removed. Is that right? Has she got a date? She's got a date for that, has she?
14th of April.
The 12th of April.
Oh.
Can I just jump in there, because I know about all of it. They're amazing to me. They look after me. They do so much for me. I've seen both of them in the last week. They might be struggling,